Yes people, welcome back to Brendan Pearson Fitness. Today we are going to be running through squat progressions. Now I see a lot of people going straight into things like back squats, front squats, trying to go straight to the end before actually mastering the techniques and the progressions or the regressions before that. Everyone should start off from the bottom and work their way up. We need to refine the technique. If you can't do a simple bodyweight squat properly, you're not going to be able to squat with a bar on your back. So I want to run through today the different exercises, some of the additional single leg and core exercises, mobility exercises that you should do alongside it to get into that proper squatting technique and build up your squats. So we're going to run through them today, starting at the very basics, progressing all the way through, and like I said, I'll jump in and explain a few additional exercises that you can do as part of prehab, as part of an additional session to help benefit your squats and reduce injury alongside that as well. So to start with, we're going to start nice and simple, just looking at a squat. What should it look like? So we're going to be starting off by slightly pushing our hips backwards and simultaneously bending our knees, trying to drop our body down to the floor while keeping our chest up, pushing our knees out to the side and trying to keep our heels on the ground. So plain and simple, like I said, make sure you're driving the knees over the toes, keeping that body upright, knees out to the side, dropping them hips back, running through it nice and slowly in the video here. So everyone knows what a squat is. It's just a lot of people do get it wrong. So jumping in to some of the common mistakes I see with squats. First common mistake is bending forward and almost turning the exercise into a deadlift, trying to drop your chest really low down to the floor. So not keeping that chest upright, not bending the knees enough, and just using the hips and just hinging purely from the hips. So this could be down to just poor technique in general. It could be down to really tight hips, really tight ankles, or just, like I said before, really poor techniques. Next mistake is heels coming off the ground. So this is mainly down to poor ankle mobility, which is something that we'll touch on later on. Heels dropping off the floor and you're pretty much going onto your toes. Again, I'll run through some exercises later on in the video to try and fix this. The next mistake is the knees caving in. So there's a lot of reasons why this could be happening. Again, just lack of practice, but mainly weak glutes and not getting our feet and our stance in a proper position. So again, I will run through some exercises to fix that. And the final one is getting the stance wrong completely. So some people go way too narrow, some people go way too wide, which limits their range of motion, forces them into bad techniques. So finding the right stance for you is what we're gonna run through as well in this video. So starting off with stance, how do you find your perfect stance? So for myself, just as a general overview, I like to say go just a bit wider than shoulder width apart, toes ever so slightly pointed outwards. However, this is just a generic thing. Everybody's hip biomechanics, body shape, limb length is different. So everybody's gonna have slightly different stance. Some people have their toes pointed completely forward, some people a little bit wider. But a good little tip that you can do to find your squat stance is lay on the floor on your back. All you're gonna do is hug one knee into your chest. See how far and how deep you can and how close you can get that knee to your chest. If you slightly rotate your hip outwards and let your knee rock to the side, do you get a little bit more range of motion? You want to find the range of motion that you can get the most with by moving your hips out to side. So once you find that stance, it might be opening up the hip a little bit, it might be keeping the hip quite neutral. Whatever stance you can get that most range of motion in is probably going to suit you a little bit better in a squat. So starting off with the first variation of a squat, where you want to start right at the bottom and build yourself up. So assisted squats. Assisted squats can be used with a barbell, just holding your hands straight out in front to give you a little bit of a boost. You can use a TRX, or you could even use resistance bands for this one. So many variations, whatever you have available to you just to assist you. So you want to start with your arms facing straight out in front of you. You want to get into that right squat stance, whatever works best for you. And like I said, just slightly assist yourself with either your fingertips. If you need to start by fully gripping the bar or the resistance band, do that, but try and use as little resistance as possible. All this is going to do is get you set up in a perfect position. Take a little bit of weight off your legs, but also help get into the proper posture. Keep that neutral spine, keep that chest up, and you can sit back, and it's almost like you're using the bar, the TRX, the band as a counterbalance to keep you upright and teach you what a proper technique feels like. And you can also get that full range of motion going all the way down and all the way up before then progressing onto a bodyweight squat. So the next progression is going to be the bodyweight squat. However, there is little variations like a sit to stand, which you could use where you're setting up a chair, a bench, a box, anything behind you, and just practice going all the way down and then standing back up. So what you can do is start with a higher box, and as you get more comfortable, as you increase your mobility, you can slowly just lower that box to the point where you can do a full range of motion squat with you getting your hips at least down to parallel with the ground or in line with your knee. So that is the goal with squats. Some people can go a little bit lower, some people can't, but that is the goal in terms of range of motion. So progressions for the bodyweight squat. Now the first progression that I would always start all my clients, even if they say they've back squatted before or front squatted, whatever it is, start by looking at their goblet squat. So a goblet squat, you can use a kettlebell or a dumbbell or any form of weight that you can hold high up on the chest. All that's gonna do is give not only one, a little bit of additional weight to make it a little bit tougher on the body. Two, it's going to help keep their chest upright, and the weight can be used as a little bit of a counterbalance. So if you imagine gravity would naturally want to try and pull your chest down towards the ground, adding a 5 kilogram, 10 kilogram, 20 kilogram dumbbell or kettlebell into that position is going to give that gravitational pull a little bit of balance to keep that chest upright. And it's also going to work the core a little bit more. So it's going to be teaching how to brace the core properly before we go into back squats and front squats. So once you've mastered the goblet squat and maybe you've lifted up to your max weight that you can actually physically hold, maybe 30, 35, 40 kilogram dumbbells, mastered that technique, then you could learn to progress to front squats. The reason that I choose front squats over going straight to a back squat is it does the same thing as a goblet squat. It keeps you in that upright position. It assists you with a little bit of that counterbalance to keep you more upright, but also again, it teaches you how to properly brace your core. Now a front squat, there is a lot of things that you need to be able to do to get into that position. For example, wrist mobility. You need to have good finger, wrist, hand mobility to be able to get your hand right underneath it and hold the bar in that position. Little stretches that you could do could just be a simple wrist stretch on the floor, stretching out off either side. You also need to stretch off your lats and triceps as well. If your lats and triceps are a little bit tight, you're probably going to struggle to get your elbow nice and high. Now there is different variations of front squats. You can do the crossover squat, you can use straps to keep your elbows up high, or you can even use an assisted Smith machine. However, I want to obviously teach proper form. Everybody, I believe, should be able to do a barbell back squat or front squat. Doesn't have to be low to low, but they should be able to do the proper technique. So once you've mastered a front squat or you're capable of doing the technique properly, this is when you can probably move on to back squats. Now, just a little quick side note, if you are struggling, say you've had a wrist injury or there's anything else like that you can't actually perform a front squat, then you could maybe progress to a back squat. The reason I just want to go to front squat first is, one, I prefer them for most individuals, and two, they're a little bit safer, and again, teaching you that proper technique can give you a little bit of counterbalance to stay upright. There's a little bit higher chance of injury and maybe things going wrong with back squats than front squats, and also you don't need as much load on front squats to get the work that you would on a back squat. So moving on to a barbell back squat. So the one thing I want to talk about to start with is the starting position. I see too many people who are starting the bar too high or too low on a squat right now. This, if you go too high, you're going to end up going up onto your tiptoes to try and get the bar in. You're going to be struggling, and that bar's not going to be set in a proper position. Now, if you go too low, you're going to have to be squatting down quite low to get into position. You're going to be wasting a little bit of energy actually getting into that position, and sometimes you can put a little bit too much strain on that lower back. So getting the bar set up probably around shoulder height, if anything a little bit lower down to get you into that proper position, is where you want to start. In terms of grip position, I see again, some people go really wide with it. If you have limited shoulder mobility, you might have to go a little bit wider rather than narrower. But if you can get narrow, as tight as you can, that's just going to make you feel a lot more secure, going to make it easier for you to brace. So try and work on that shoulder mobility, get your hands as narrow as possible, head underneath the bar, and you want to really try and pull the bar into your body. In general, you want to try and get the bar not right on the top of your neck, but somewhere just a little bit lower down on the softer part where your traps normally are. So if you don't have any traps, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to do some strokes or something like that. But I see too many people as well setting back squats up with a hip thrust pad or any sort of cushion pad on their neck.
This is going to set the bar in an awkward position and also put a lot of strain on your neck. So I would really advise, if you do struggle with that bar on your back and it's really uncomfortable, get used to it and maybe try and wear a hoodie or something instead, where there's a little bit of material in between you and the bar, rather than a thick pad, which is not going to get you in the right position. So with the back squat, exact same things as goblet squats and front squats. The technique doesn't change, but there's going to be a slight little bit more of a lean forward because that counterbalance is slightly taken away. So this is going to work the erectors, so the spinal muscles, a little bit more than a front squat or a goblet squat would. You also want to make sure that you're setting yourself up in the middle of the bar. See, too many people, again, setting themselves up slightly to one side. This is just going to make it imbalanced, and it's going to make your squat feel really uncomfortable. So make sure you're setting up straight in the middle of the bar before you go underneath the bar. So moving on to the last variation of squat, which is probably the most advanced squat, something that some people might want to incorporate into their program, so I've thrown it in there now, is an overhead squat. So this works a lot more mobility in the shoulders, in the thoracic spine, and in the hips to keep your chest upright and keep the weight straight overhead. So you want to set yourself up with the bar on your back, and you might need to take your hands a little bit wider. So the wider you are, the less shoulder mobility needed. You see the likes of Sonny Webster and people who can do this with their hands nice and narrow. For the majority of people, this is going to be really, really hard. So start with your hands nice and wide. Start with an empty bar, or maybe even start with a broomstick or an empty band or something like that. You're going to push the bar up straight overhead so your arms are nice and straight directly above you. Then you're just going to drop back into a squat, keeping that weight overhead. Again, there's a lot more stability involved, a lot more core involved, and you will not be able to lift as heavy a weight on this one unless you've got shoulders like The Rock or something like that, I don't know. But this one's a little bit more tricky. It's an Olympic lift. It's a lot tougher than your back squats and your front squat. But I thought I'd throw this one in there because it is a progression, again, if you want to try and take your training to the next level. So in terms of assisting exercises to help you get better at your squat, I'm a big believer in single leg work. Now, doing single leg or unilateral variations of exercises will help fix, one, any imbalances between left and right side. So you might be a very right side dominant person. So starting on the left side, doing some single leg work will help fix strength, and also, like I said, any imbalances in terms of mobility or muscle bulk between the two sides. Also, if you can't do a simple split squat or rear foot elevated split squat or reverse lunge or anything like that, I would not advise you to go into doing back squats or front squats. Trust me, learn the stability. It's amazing how many of my clients that I've seen in the past who have back squatted before can't stand on one leg, can't do a set of 10 split squats just body weight, but yet they can squat 60, 70 kilograms with weight on their back. Learn how to stabilize and learn how to balance on one leg before you then progress onto your back squats and your front squats. So maybe from goblet squats, you might want to think about throwing in split squats, rear foot elevated split squats, things like Cossack lunges, which is going to be working a little bit of mobility, also strengthening up the adductor muscles, which are, again, very overlooked and undertrained. Like I said before, examples of reverse lunges, box step ups. There's so many single leg exercises, and if you're advanced enough, you can even try and do pistol squats. Again, puts a lot more emphasis on ankle mobility, which I'll touch on later in the video. There's a reason I haven't put any leg presses in on this one, as I want to really focus on the mobility and the functional aspect that back squats, front squats, goblet squats, all that sort of stuff actually do. So there's no stability really needed in things like hack squats, leg presses, Smith machine squats. I'm not saying that they're terrible, they definitely have their place. I use them myself, but for the majority of people, I think everyone should be able to do the movement of a front squat, a back squat. Not to say everybody needs to go and lift 1 rep maxes on these lifts. Incorporate them within your program as and when you need to, but they're a fundamental movement and everybody should be able to squat properly without the need for assistance or anything like that. So along with single leg and other assistant exercises to help build your squat, I mentioned before about the knees caving in on squats. Now, building strong glutes, strong hamstrings and a strong posterior chain will massively help you improve your squat, stay more stable and reduce any injury risk. So exercises that will help with that knee caving in are things that are going to be training our abductors, so our glute muscles that are pushing our knees outwards. Simple activation exercises like a lateral band walk or a climb, or if you're in the gym, the abductor machine, activating the glutes or maybe doing some sets of them will help build strong glutes. Also, compound posterior chain exercises that are going to be training the glutes and hamstrings, things like hip thrust, also things like RDLs, Romanian deadlifts, normal deadlifts, single leg deadlifts, all that sort of stuff are going to be training the posterior chain. So making sure we have a balance between our posterior chain, so our glutes and hamstrings, and also our quads is definitely important, not only in terms of squatting, but also in terms of joint health as well. So moving on to mobility exercises now. I'm a big believer in mobility myself. It's something that I've put into my routine pretty much daily now to work on injury prevention, to work on my movement patterns and improve exercises like my squat. So the first exercise which I would recommend people trying is just simple squat holds. So sink into the bottom of a squat and get comfortable in that position. Now you might find this is really uncomfortable to start with and you can't quite get the technique right, you can't keep your chest up, your knees aren't pushing out the side. It's probably because you're going to be tight in your hips, your ankles and in your back. So a little tip that you can do for this exercise is use a 5 or 10 kilogram plate or even kettlebell or dumbbell and just hold that out in front, and this again will hold a little bit more counterbalance, balance out the gravity and make you stay a little bit more upright. You can also use the weight as a little bit of a boost to stretch off your groins and your ankles again when you're in the bottom of that position. A nice little warm-up exercise which I always like to throw in is the greater stretch. Again, like I talked about before, ankle mobility, hip mobility, and spine mobility, so thoracic spine mobility, are three things that everyone should be working on, especially if they want to improve their squat. So the greater stretch, as you can see, is just lunging back, trying to drop the hips down towards the ground, and with the inside and then the outside hand, rotating as far around as you can, holding that top position for maybe a split second or two. I always do a set of 5 reps either side before all my workouts, just because it's the greatest stretch. The name kind of speaks for itself. So talking about thoracic mobility, you're probably thinking, why do I need to work on my upper body mobility when I'm doing a squat? It will help so much in keeping that chest upright, especially in exercises like the front squat. So exercises like the great stretch and also lying T-spine rotations where you're starting your hand on the floor and rotating all the way around, overhead to the other side and then back round will help loosen this off. Again, throw these into your pre-workout or any sort of mobility routine, and trust me, if you stick to them consistently, you'll see your difference. Exercises like couch stretch and pigeon stretch, any sort of hip mobility exercises will definitely help in your squat. That's why I do recommend trying to get into some stretching, maybe every other day, if not daily, to help improve with not only squatting movements, but other movements that you do in the gym. And finally, one of the biggest mobility exercises or mobility areas that people need to work on, which I see commonly neglected, especially in athletes that involve a lot of running, like football, rugby, basketball, or just your general 5K runner. Dorsiflexion. So dorsiflexion is ankle mobility, the ability to get the knee passed over the toes. Now, people who have tight calves, have tight ankles, or maybe had a previous ankle injury are going to be really lacking in this area. So one of the stretches that I really like to do, which I've incorporated in my daily routine, is a banded assisted dorsiflexion. So the band adds as a little bit of an ankle distraction. So for example, for myself, I've had ankle injuries in the past, so I have a little bit of ankle impingement. There's a little bit of bone that kind of blocks my range of motion. All the band does is just push that out the way to allow me to get a little bit of a deeper stretch. I'm just really thinking about driving my knee over my toe, trying to keep my heel flat on the ground and feeling the stretch down the backs of my calf and in my Achilles. Variation without a box or without a resistance band would just be a simple knee to wall, trying to drive that knee again over your toe, and you want to start really close to the wall and work your way back. It's a little general rule of thumb. A little goal for yourself to try and hit is be able to get your foot or your toes 14 centimeters away from the wall to be able to get in that nice squat mobility. So one little tip that I do like to use if you, one, have poor ankle mobility for the time being, or two, have slightly longer limbs like myself, if you're a taller guy or girl, this could be a little trick that could help you improve your squat for the short term, but long term you need to make sure that you are doing your mobility exercises, especially around your ankles. So a little tip is just to use a little bit of a heel elevation. So this could be done by either putting a mat or a plate underneath your heels, some squat shoes, or using a decline board which has got quite a severe angle. So all this is going to do is take out any of that needed dorsiflexion, which you might be limited by poor ankle mobility, just to help keep yourself a little bit more upright and also emphasize the quads a little bit more. Finally, moving on to core exercises. Now, core exercises can massively help your squat. Some people say that doing front squats and back squats will actually build a strong core themselves. Yes, they do. However, I'm a big believer in assistant exercises to benefit you in terms of improving your squat and other exercises like your deadlift. So throwing these in, especially if you're a beginner, will massively help you, not just in terms of improving your technique, but also reducing the chance of injury, or also reducing any current pain that you have in your lower back or in your hips. So great examples are dead bugs and ab wheel rollouts. Now, I've walked through how to properly perform a dead bug. It looks like a simple exercise, but trust me, it's really hard. And then also ab wheel rollouts, making sure that we are engaging our core and not letting our spine start to bend at all throughout the exercise, keeping everything nice and neutral, will definitely help you when it comes to your back squats and front squats. So just to wrap up this video on squatting, I've talked through everything, starting from assisted squatting, how to get from there all the way up to progressing to overhead squats, which are a lot more advanced. Make sure that you're getting your technique right before progressing. Remember, do not worry about the load you are lifting, the weights that you are lifting in the gym. First of all, master the technique, work on your mobility, stay consistent with stuff. You might need to do a little bit more repetition, a little bit more frequent exercises, rather than trying to push the weight and the intensity too soon and ending up injuring yourself or even worse. So make sure you're not only doing front squats, back squats, goblet squats, so not just double leg exercises, but also incorporating single leg exercises to fix imbalances. And if you can't do a simple split squat or lunge, please don't try and progress and do back squats and front squats. And if you can, if you're someone who's always stuck to machines, learn how to squat first and then use the leg presses, the hack squats, all that other stuff is assistant exercises to build up strength, but make sure you've got your basics in place before you do that. So hopefully you have enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's been informative and you've learned a little bit from it. If anybody needs any more help with anything, from one-to-one online coaching, one-to-one personal training, if you're in the Newcastle area, drop me a message and we can organize a free consultation call, a free consultation session to get you set up and look at the things like I've talked about in here, in terms of your mobility, in terms of your unilateral strength. If there's any imbalances and there's things that you specifically need to work on, we'll not only touch up on that, but also I'll try and help you out the best I can with your nutrition and also setting good habits, which will definitely stand you in good stead, not just in terms of the gym, but also in different aspects of your life outside of the gym. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give it a like, subscribe, let me know in the comments what you thought. If there's any videos or any topics you would like me to cover in the future, that would be great. Make sure as well you follow me on Instagram, link is down below, TikTok, and follow the podcast process. Again, all the links are down below in my bio. So that's everything for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Over and out. So starting off with the first, wow.